Take what you wanted, suffice to leave.
This time, we're going to dig up a place the locals used to call the Pit. This is where we all used to live. No surprise, but when I was a kid, growing up in the Buckeye State, my dad used to tell us stories about when he was a kid. Even then, he was telling us about how much things had changed. That's him there, James McCaskey, the old man in the sea. I'm kidding. If you knew him, fishing really wasn't his thing. I mean, he doesn't even know what to do with those fish. He's about as much a fisherman as my mom there with the axe is a lumberjack. Yeah. Well, nicely done. Anyway, my dad, wee Jim there, was born in Scotland, but moved here when he was 4. So Elyria, Ohio isn't just where I used to live, but it's where my dad grew up too. Hang on. I don't know what happened, but my dad doesn't have his pop gun anymore. His baby sister is losing it, and I'm pretty sure my grandpa's doing that thing where you pretend to smile and tell him to just take the damn picture. Anyway, he was obviously right, but it's a small town, so a lot of the places he knew, I knew too. Like the slot shop over on Cleveland Street. That was still there when I was a kid, as was Hazel's just around the corner. I will say, this is the first McDonald's in the area, and I kind of vaguely recall it, but this is the place that we had filet of fish on Good Fridays. But he wasn't wrong. I mean, things do change. Sometime before she passed, my mom was telling me stories about back then, and she was waxing poetic about this place downtown they all used to go to as teenagers that they called the Pit. Evidently, it was all cherry cokes, french fries with gravy, and teenagers doing, teenager stuff. This isn't the first time I'd heard about this place, though. Both she and Dad used to talk about the Pit. And to be fair, it did sound pretty great. I was able to locate an address, but it's gone now. I mean, the entire building is missing. It's just a parking lot. So, there you go. Come on, let's see if we can't figure out where all the Elyria kids used to hang out. Turns out, the Pit was actually called the Paradise Restaurant Soda Grill. At least that's how it started. Founded in 1921 by a Syrian immigrant named Harry Zahars, the Paradise was a fixture on Broad Street. I mean, they did a little remodeling through the years, but it was your timeless diner. No one knows why or even who started calling it the Pit. Seemed like a nice little place. I created this to help visualize things a little. As I understand it, just as you walk in the door, to one side was the lunch counter. Behind it stood that classic soda fountain. You would have likely ordered a chocolate soda or potentially a cherry Coke. Both are pretty standard. Opposite that was the register, where the proprietor, Mr. Harry, would position himself. That's him there. In front of him is all the candy and whatnot they sold at the register, but what you can't see is in a glass case just kind of down in front. They made all these chocolates and candies right on site. The walls were lined with booths where the kids would jam in as many as they could fit, while the tabletops ran through the center with wooden chairs. Word had it that on any given weekday, that place could see anywhere from 400 to 600 teenagers just in the couple of hours after school. That's nuts. So how does a quiet little family place that's been around for almost 30 years become the hippest place in town? Well, in 1950, they did update things a little. They even added air conditioning and that big blue sign out front, which I suppose didn't hurt. But I think there were a couple of other things going on there too. For starters, while everyone else was hitting them for 65 cents a Coke, Harry was still charging them only 15 cents. I get it, not everyone was interested in tons of teenage patrons, but Harry kind of leaned into it. I mean, he had some basic rules, and I get the impression he wasn't joking about them either. This is an editorial where the writer is making the case that parents today needed to be more firm with their kids, like Harry. Everyone talks about this bell I guess he kept next to the register, and if you violated his rules, he'd ring that bell, and whap, there you go, you'd be banned. For a day, a week, a month, didn't matter. It's his place, his rules. I feel like at some point in time, everybody got the bell. Also, at the start of every year, Harry would hop up on top of one of the tables, ring his bell, and remind everyone of the rules, and then deliver what was effectively a motivational speech to this throng of noisy teenagers. Because, really, he loved them. The other thing that I think made the pit so popular might just have been more of a happenstance. You see, Elyria finally got another high school. Yeah, for over 100 years, EHS, Elyria High School, has been the only high school shaping the minds of Elyria teenagers. Now, to last that long, they're going to need to expand things occasionally to accommodate, but it worked. This is the oldest high school in all of Ohio. Right here, you can even see the newer construction juxtaposed to the oldest building on campus. I mean, up until a certain point in time, if anyone graduated in Elyria, you could pretty much be assured they were a pioneer. Well, a decent post-World War II economy combined with steady population growth resulted in a ridiculous amount of teenagers. So much so that also in 1950, the Catholics got together and built their first and, well, only high school in the diocese and the second high school, albeit private, in Elyria, and creatively named it Elyria Catholic High School, the Panthers. This is from my mom's 1967 yearbook. That's her there, Patricia Moran with her BFF Jean and their mutual friend Stephanie. This is from the graduation ceremony. That last one there's my mom. I want to circle back to an October day a couple of years before all this. Mom and Stephanie were skipping some sort of class assignment to go hang out with Stephanie's boyfriend over at the pit. Well, I'm going to let Mom tell it.
We got the afternoon off at school at EC to go downtown to watch La Boheme at the Rivoli Theater. So everybody took advantage of that, right?
Okay. I want to stop you right there because I did a little research, and that year La Boheme only played at the Lake Theater, which is like a block up the street.
That was in 65. And we went to the Paradise Restaurant, went to the pit afterwards to have Cokes. I was sitting on one side of the table with Kitty, and Stephanie was sitting on the other side of the table. He came in and sat next to her.
He is Stephanie's boyfriend.
Right. When you walked in, you had to tell them what you wanted, okay? You could come in and sit and have Coke and fries, but you had to order Coke and fries. If you didn't order something, they threw you out. Literally threw you out. Okay, there's this little Greek guy, and he would stand on the table and ring a bell, and you go. He was very cocky, and he came in and he sat down.
The boyfriend.
Yep. So Stephanie had finished her Coke, and she was eating her fries, and the girl came over to take his order. And he said, I already had my Coke, and he goes, look, it's right there. So he got thrown out. So we all left.
Sure.
That was the first time I'd met him.
The first time you met Dad?
Yeah.
Jim McCaskey.
Yeah.
And he was dating?
Stephanie Doman.
Stephanie Doman.
How do you forget that? You can't forget that.
Nope, but I don't feel like you would. A few weeks later, those two end up on a blind date at a pizza joint over on Cleveland Street. And evidently they hit it off.
Yeah, we did. I walked in the house, looked at my mom, and I said, I met the right guy. And she's looked at me, she goes, okay. It's just one of those things.
She wasn't really wrong either. Those two would literally spend the rest of their lives together. And to think, before that day in the pit, they were strangers. By the mid-1970s, Harry would sell the restaurant. The space and the name would be used for a while as an ice cream shop and then a Chinese restaurant. I don't know, it seems odd. But the glory days were gone, times had changed. Before his death, Harry created a couple of scholarships for those kids that he really did love so much, and they're still around today. However, in the early 1980s, the building itself, then called the Highbrows Lounge, became the third in a string of unsolved downtown fires. The movie theater they were supposed to be going to had also burnt down years before. The pizza place is gone too. Nothing so dramatic as a fire, though. The owner built up a little mini pizza empire and then sold it all off and moved to Florida. You know, now that I think about it, just about the only place left from everything I've mentioned is Hazel's Restaurant. Seriously. Opened in 1945, Hazel's has been standing sentinel there at the end of Cleveland Street for ever. It's never had quite the following of the pit, so I'm guessing it wasn't so teen-friendly back in the day. I mean, it's always had more of a family diner sort of vibe, so I suppose it was never going to be particularly hip. However, now we're getting into my memories, and I kind of feel like we're getting off track. We were wrapping things up with the Paradise. There might not be a more beloved teen hangout ever than the pit. At some point in time, I think just about every teenager from that generation went there. That means they all have their memories of this place too that they hold dear. I want to thank my mom for sharing hers. Thanks, Mom. Miss you. Next time, we're going to skate around in circles just to keep warm. See, this is why everybody moves south. It's this, where we all used to live.